The second season of Netflix's Avatar is upon us. We all know how great the original cartoon is, and the first season of the live-action adaptation of Avatar has been out there for about 2 years. So now it's time to take a look at this new season and look back at the first one and try to figure out what the hell goes on in the minds of the writers of this show. Avatar: The Last Airbender is my favorite animated series. It's a perfect piece of media and it should be untouchable. However, with the live-action craze we've been living for the past few years, Netflix decided they wanted to give this one a shot. So in September of 2018, they announced an Avatar: The Last Airbender live-action TV show. Was I excited? No. The creators of the original cartoon left the production due to creative differences. That can be good. I've been alive long enough to know that this turning animations into live-action thing was never a good idea to begin with. Cause if you think about it, doesn't even make sense. If it ends up being different from the original, the chances of being worse are dangerously high, and the better the source material, proportionally bigger these chances get. When you have a perfect piece of media such as Avatar, the chances of any modification to the story being bad, or at least equal to the original, are almost 100%. Bad changes are obviously bad, and equal changes are useless, because if the quality is gonna be the same, just save yourself some effort and straight up copy the original. And if the live action ends up being exactly the same as the animated stuff, I'll just watch the animated stuff. So in a sense, I want the live action to be different, but it has to be slightly better, or at the very least, as good as the original. The live action version has to enhance the story in some way to justify its existence. Never in my entire life have I watched any form of animated media and thought to myself, this would be better as a live action. But in countless times I've watched some live action stuff and thought, this should have been an animation. And this show was in the works for so long. It was announced in 2018 but only came out in February 22nd, 2024, which is my birthday date, by the way. For a few years it looked like it would never come out, and I'm starting to think it would be better this way. Obviously, it's very hard to compare anything to Avatar, because the original show is a masterpiece, considered to be one of the best pieces of media of all time, purely and perfectly executed art. So coming from this as its source material, Netflix had one job and one job only: replicate the animated show but with people in front of a camera. Because like I said, the better the source material, the higher the chances of messing it up, so they needed to be very careful with the changes. They weren't, by the way. And it shouldn't be very hard, since 1. The source material is already perfect, 10 out of 10, no notes. It should be a no-brainer. And 2, we actually have a pretty solid example of what not to do with an Avatar live action. The 2010 movie The Last Airbender is just awful. The visuals are completely out of place, the characters look like cheap cosplays of themselves, and don't even get me started on the whitewashing. The writing is horrible, the dialogue is childish, the action sequences could put someone with insomnia to sleep, and they absolutely misunderstood the lore and how bending works. I mean, look at this. There are 6 people stomping on the ground and making this little dance just to move one rock the size of a watermelon at a speed my grandma with fibromyalgia could dodge. And the firebenders need a pre-existing fire to bend for some reason, which makes them the weakest nation ever. You can just put out every open flame and the firebender becomes just a dude. There is no way this fire nation started the war and conquered part of the world. Also, the scene of Iroh finding out Aang is the Avatar by putting a rock and pouring some water in front of him, and the rock kinda shaking to his presence and the water going in his direction on its own is just ridiculous.
My name is Aang.
No, it's not! This amount of disrespect with Avatar should be used as an example. Netflix should have looked at this movie and recognized the chance of making it right. So in 2024 the show came out and it was okay. The first season of Avatar: The Last Airbender is kinda weak. You can see they were trying to be faithful, they didn't change a lot of stuff, but the things they did change didn't work out for me. But first I want to talk about the good things the first season did, cause I don't wanna be unfair. And also because there aren't a lot of good stuff to say about this show, so when I start bringing up the problems, buckle up. I don't know if anyone cares at this point, but spoiler alert for the original Avatar and the 2 seasons of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Netflix, live action, adaptation, the first thing this show got right and has to be praised is the visuals. It's clear they made an insane amount of effort to make everything look like the cartoon brought to life, and I mean everything. The scenarios, the props, the clothes, the animals and spirits, it's so nice to see how much they care about the details on this. The Northern Water Tribe looks gorgeous, Omashu feels so alive, and all of the locations they go through are stunning. They actually built some of the big locations. We see the air temples and Ba Sing Se in season 2 from far up in the air. That was filmed in a scale model. The only CGI on screen is Appa. Speaking of which, the CGI is very good in most of the show. It has some weird moments, but overall the effects are great. The bending looks amazing. The choreography for the action sequence and especially the bending scenes is so good. And I would like to point out one specific scene that doesn't exist in the cartoon but it was so much fun, which is the Aang vs Zuko street fight in Omashu. What an exciting sequence, feels like a Jackie Chan movie. If you watched Avatar you know how important the music is to this universe, and thank God Netflix did not underestimate said importance. The music and sound effects go so hard, they recreated the most iconic parts of the soundtrack masterfully. Listening to it almost feel like watching the cartoon all over again. That's an important aspect when we talk about this sort of adaptation. it needs to capture the feeling of watching it for the first time, and a very significant part of that feeling relies on the casting choices, which for me, Netflix got almost perfectly right. But before talking about casting, there is one situation I need to address. We have a very serious ethnical matter in the show, because even though it doesn't take place in the real world and it's all fictional countries and nations, these nations are based on real life cultures, especially Asian and indigenous cultures. They are not direct one-to-one copies, it's more about a very inspired blend. The air nomads are heavily inspired by the Tibetan monks, the Fire Nation is basically Imperial Japan, the Earth Kingdom draws a lot of culture and aesthetics from China, and the Water Tribe is modeled after indigenous Arctic populations and Native Americans. It does not have a real impact on the narrative itself, but that doesn't mean it can be ignored. In my opinion, the ethnical representation is on point, but there is the controversy involving the actor who plays Sokka, Ian Owsley. To sum up, seems like he identifies himself as a Native American from a tribe that is not federally recognized by the US government. Some people say that this means he wasn't supposed to be in the show and it's straight up whitewashing, while others say that not having recognition from the government doesn't make him less of a Native American. I read a lot about it, but I couldn't find an official solution. Neither Netflix or the actor talked about it publicly, so I'll just assume the situation was dealt with, since he's still on the show, and give my opinions exclusively based on acting performance and what I see on screen. So about the casting, Netflix got it almost perfectly right. Gordon Cormier is not the best actor I've ever seen, but he does a pretty solid job, and on top of that, look at him! Look at his little round head, this is Aang! Gao Wen-Diu is good in the role of Katara, but the script doesn't help her, more on that later. And Paul Sun-Hyun Lee brings a very cozy performance as expected from Myro's character. I feel like getting a cup of tea with him in a rainy afternoon and talk to him for hours about life and stuff. Elizabeth Yu as Azula is fine, but Mariah Jang as Suki looks so much good, Arden Cho is awesome as June, and Daniel Day Kim was born to play Ozai, absolutely perfect casting. But the top-notch casting choices for me are Ian Owsley as Sokka and Dallas Liu as Zuko. They are amazing. Sokka is really funny and the actor has the comic timing he needs to make it work, and Dallas Liu really shows a lot of the anger the character feels, perfectly embodying the drama queen Zuko is. He ran! I like Mong Gyatso as well. A lot of people were bothered by the new scenes with him, but his relationship with Aang is very well built and the actor's interpretation is on point. The scene in the spiritual world where they reunite is so sweet. Tell me, look at him and tell me you don't feel like hugging him. Another thing the live action changed, and for me was really a hit or miss, with more misses than hits, is the mature approach to the story. We're gonna talk about the misses in a bit, but there were two moments where it really hits. First was the confrontation of Iroh's past. There's this scene where an Earth Kingdom soldier brings up his actions from when Iroh was a general for the Fire Nation, and you can really feel the weight of all of that. We need to keep in mind that Iroh is not just a cute old uncle. He used to be a powerful general. He is known as Dragon of the West for a reason. A lot of innocent lives were lost to his hands, and while watching the cartoon, that's very easy to forget. Actually, I think the cartoon makes it easy to forget a lot of the heavy stuff going on in this universe. The massacre of the Air Nomads, for example, is something the cartoon never actually shows, but the way the live action handles it is another hit. It shows us how the war started, and it's so brutal, it's heartbreaking. It portrays the cruelty of the Fire Nation and how much of a menace the Air Nomads were, because they were able to hold them back for a while during the comet's passing. And let me remind you, the Air Nomads are pacifists, which means they don't have an actual army or any kind of formal battle training. I just think the scene is misplaced. It would fit better later into the season, especially because of the meaning of this moment originally, but the scene itself is very good. Enough commendations, it's time for condemnations. Watching the show, I came to the conclusion that everything that went wrong with the Avatar live action boils down to one issue that spreads out into smaller, more specific problems, and this one issue is writing. This show is so poorly written, and when you compare it to the writing of the original, making an adaptation with such a bad writing is a crime. The dialogue is horrible. The only moment it works is when they copy the cartoon word by word. All the rest is just over-explaining the plot and exposition. This show is one of the worst cases of tell don't show I've ever seen. Originally, Aang goes to the temple where he grew up and finds the bodies of his people and has a very valid reaction. That's how he finds out about the Air Nomads massacre in a deeply emotional scene. The live action straight up tells him about it. It shows it to the audience. In that scene I said it was misplaced, but the core meaning of this moment is gone. They turned this deeply emotional scene into a 2 minutes long monologue from a character no one cares about. And having her recite the opening line of the cartoon is not a good reference, it's just bad writing. In every single scene they keep telling you what the characters are feeling. It's almost like they want to tell you how you are supposed to feel. And they do that all the time, repeatedly. The characters only open their mouths to either tell you what they are thinking and feeling or to explain out loud their motivations and plot points. I lost count of how many times Zuko repeated that he needs to capture the Avatar to regain his honor, or that Aang talked about the pressure he feels feels for being the Avatar and he doesn't know what he's doing, or the same discourse about letting go of the past and focusing on the future. Seems like they wrote 2 lines for each character and just copy-paste them over and over again throughout 8 episodes.
The Avatar, the next master of all 4 elements.
Only the Avatar, master of all 4 elements.
The Avatar, the one person with the ability to master all 4 elements.
Only the Avatar, the one person who can master all 4 elements.
He is not just an airbender. He is the master of all 4 elements.
And not only that, they also really like to tell you what's happening, or what just happened 5 minutes ago, or what's going to happen in 5 minutes. That's why the acting feels worse than it actually is, because the writing is so bad that no matter how good the actors are, the line deliveries sound robotic and out of place. Every conversation sounds unnatural, forced, like the AI generated stuff we see around the internet. All of that seems to be because they don't trust the audience's intelligence to understand what's going on, and I think that's part of the problem. But the big thing is that they just assume everyone is scrolling their phones while watching, and that's not an accident, that's a choice. Netflix actually asks the writers to write the shows to be second screen, which means they give all of the information in the most obvious way possible and repeat information as much as they can, so people can understand everything while doing something else. But the thing is, when you write a show like that, you're not only insulting your audience, but you're encouraging that kind of behavior, because the show comes out so boring and repetitive that you don't feel attracted to it. You don't feel like looking at the TV and paying attention, so it gets very hard to resist the urges of grabbing your phone. Like I heard someone say a while ago, if your show is designed to be better appreciated while half paying attention, why would I devote my full attention to it? The show is not supposed to be watched, it's background noise. And this way of making content is really the curse of our generation. It's so disrespectful to the people who want to actually watch the show, and doing that to a piece of art such as Avatar is even worse. The lack of humor also bothers me a lot. I know they are going for a more mature and realistic take on the story, but this show is supposed to be about a bunch of kids traveling the world together. They're in times of war and everything is very serious, but at the same time, Katara is 14, Sokka is 15, Aang is 12. They're still kids. Katara and Sokka are living their little ice village in the middle of nowhere for the first time in their lives. They're discovering freedom. They have a lot of silly moments where they just have some fun, and most of the time they are very silly in general because, you know, they're kids! This looks like another case of a studio being maybe embarrassed of adapting an animated show for children and thinking they can make it better by making it gritty, grounded and naturalistic, and by that it's proven that they completely missed the point of why the original is so beloved in the first place. And also seems like they think being mature and naturalistic means turning the lights off. Live action Katara is an absolute pain. Like I said before, it's not Gal and Dio's fault. I can see she did the best she could with what was given to her, but did she have to be given so little? This is a very weird representation of Katara. She's supposed to be like the mother of the group. She's very assertive and commanding. She's always bossing around the rest of the gang, but she's also very kind and protective of the others. She's a loud person when she needs to speak her mind. No one ever steps over her. I mean, she challenges Master Paku purely because he's sexist and actually gives him some trouble. She has a temper, but she always tries to do what's best for everyone. She's always taking care of her friends. She's supposed to be this mother figure because she needed to grow up very quickly when her mom died, taking responsibilities an 8-year-old should never have to take. Sokka literally says she's like a mother to him. In a conversation with Toph, he says that when their mom died, Katara took over her duties within the water tribe and at home with Sokka. She's always been there for him. And now when he thinks of his mom and tries to remember what she looked like, the only face he can see is Katara's. Netflix took all of those layers and set it on fire. In the live action, she's quiet, bland and even kinda stupid. Looks like the actress is doing a bad job, but again, it's not her fault. The character was written so emotionless that the actress has no space to act. She does almost nothing for the story. Her contribution was reduced so close to zero. It's insane to think that removing Katara completely from the story could almost go unnoticed. Everything that made her so unique in the cartoon was stolen from her. Like her jealousy of Aang when he starts to show himself as a waterbending prodigy and learns quickly stuff she took more time to learn. She gets mad and even treats Aang poorly because she doesn't feel less talented. That's completely non-existent in the live action, mainly because Aang simply don't waterbend. In the book 1 Water, the whole point of the season is getting Aang to the north so he can learn waterbending, and he ends up practicing and learning a lot from Katara on the way there. But Netflix decided that this was not important. Netflix didn't think that in the season about Aang learning waterbending, it was not important for him to waterbend. Let that sink in. The whole Jet storyline also pisses me off a little bit. In the live action, they almost immediately suspect him, but Katara still falls for his charm, making she look gullible and childish, while in the original she's a little charmed by him, but mostly moved by her radical desire of fighting the Fire Nation. But the worst of all is the fight against Master Pakku. The fight itself is pretty ridiculous. You can forget all of the praise I gave to the fighting and bending scenes when we talk about this one, but her reasons to fight him are the real problem here. In the cartoon, he refuses to train her for combat because she's a girl, and in the Northern Water Tribe, water-bending women are part of the war only to heal wounded men, so she explodes in anger and challenges him to a duel. So originally, she's fighting against sexism and the whole Water Tribe's culture. After the fight, Pakku's impressed with her potential, but most importantly, he sees her grandma's necklace and understands that his traditions drove away the love of his life. In the live action, Katara's trying to convince him to let her help against the upcoming Fire Nation invasion. She just wants to prove herself to him, and Pakku realizes that she can be useful in the fight after all. This little modification completely changes everything about both these characters. Katara is not fighting for women's rights in the Water Tribe. She's submitting to the sexist culture and seeking the approval of a man. And Pakku doesn't change his ways at all. He's just like, okay, fine, you can fight, whatever. I hate what they did to Katara. She's so boring. It's so unfair to just destroy the essence of such a good character. While in the subject of good characters being destroyed, I need to address Bumi. I'm sad already. In the cartoon, Bumi hides his identity at first. He captures Sokka and Katara and makes Aang go through a bunch of challenges to free them. In the end, he reveals that he is in fact his childhood friend Bumi. He shows that Sokka and Katara were never facing real danger. Bumi was just playing a prank on Aang. Their relationship is so beautiful. He is the only person from Aang's life before his disappearance that is still alive. Bumi is just so happy to see his friend that he wants to play with him and have some crazy fun like they used to do 100 years ago. But Netflix decided that none of this was important, so they made Bumi a straight up psychopath. When they first meet, they immediately recognize each other and Bumi greets Aang with pure resentment. He blames Aang for disappearing for 100 years and allowing the war to happen. By the way, let me take a tangent here. In the live action, they changed the whole reason why Aang disappeared. Let me explain. The tradition dictates that the Avatar will be told they are the Avatar when they turn 16 to begin their training on the 4 elements and take their responsibility with the world and so on. But for hearing about the Fire Lord Sozin's plans for a war, the Air Nomads decided to tell Aang he was the Avatar when he was 12 and start his training as soon as possible in order to be prepared for a potential Fire Nation attack. Originally, Aang feels the pressure of such a responsibility, and when he finds out he's gonna be separated from Monkey Atsu, he runs away. He gets caught on the storm and freezes himself for 100 years like we all know. But the key point here is, he was running away from his responsibilities as the Avatar. Netflix twisted that story a little bit. The context is the same, the only difference is that Aang did not run away, he just wanted to clear his head. He takes Appa and goes for a fly to take a deep breath, but he gets caught on the storm and freezes himself for 100 years. Doesn't seem much of a change, right? Well, it is. In this version, he's not running away anymore. Willingly leaving behind the Air Temple and his duties as the Avatar during the war is crucial for Aang's character. The amount of guilt he feels for the death of his people and the suffering of the world is a big part of who he is. He never intended to vanish for a century, but he was in fact running away. The adaptation turned it into a very unfortunate accident which takes off all of the weight from Aang's shoulders. And that's why Bumi blaming him for disappearing makes even less sense, because here it's even less his fault than originally. So which one is it? Bumi's challenges are not part of a big prank from a friend, but instead he's trying to teach Aang that the war requires ruthless decisions, and when they fight each other we can see the rage and bitterness in Bumi's face. That duel feels personal in both versions, but while in the original we can see Bumi's having fun with a friend even before Aang knowing who he was, in the live action he's venting about the last 100 years of suffering. Bumi's supposed to be so important to Aang that he names his first child after him, but they just turn him into this angry, resentful old man. Aang doesn't have his childhood friend anymore, and this breaks my heart. This version of Fire Lord Ozai is not entirely bad, his scenes are fine and Daniel Day-Kim is perfect in the role, but the thing here is, he shows up too much and too early. I brushed over this on my video about him. One of the main things that creates Ozai's sense of presence and power is the mystery. The fact that we only hear about him throughout books 1 and 2 and only get to actually see him in book 3 creates this image of a looming dread. The show leaves us to imagine how much of a threat Ozai really is based on stories that shows us what he's capable of, and the monsters in our head are always way worse than the reality. For me, that's the main reason why Ozai works as the major antagonist of the story. In the live action, he's there, like all the time. Out of the 8 episodes of the season, he's only absent in the first one. We see him for the first time in episode 2 and never stop seeing him. If the live action only showed him doing some evil stuff like turning people to ashes and whatnot, maybe it would be fine. Still too much, but fine. However, in most of his scenes, he's just around. He's not doing much, he talks to people, gives orders, and looks serious. This constant presence in the show only serves to banalize him. We get familiar with him, therefore we stop being afraid of him. Azula is another case of a character that was completely misunderstood by the writers. My first complaint about her is the same as Ozai. She shows up too early and she's there for way too long. But I wish that was the only problem with live action Azula. This girl is a maniac, she's an unstoppable force, probably the most talented firebender we ever see in this universe. She respects only her father and she's willing to burn the whole world and everyone else in it to the ground only to please him. So in a sense, she is a daddy's girl, but she's a psychopath, she's a cold-blooded killer, she's terrifyingly confident and absurdly disciplined. She only shows a glimpse of vulnerability when she's losing her mind. She has to literally go crazy to expose a crack in her shell. This adaptation of Azula doesn't work like that. She's also here in every other episode like I mentioned, but for some reason all she ever does is talk about how she wants to be perfect in the eyes of her daddy. We see the same scene like 3 different times where Azula is saying how she's not that good or under a lot of pressure and Mei and Ty Lee tell her she's perfect or whatever. Also, why are these two here? They're the most useless characters I've ever seen. And I'm sorry, but who the hell are you? Mei is my pick for the worst casting choice and characterization of this show. Nothing against the actress or anything regarding her appearance, but she just don't look anything like Mei and her acting is so out of place. I know it's not a copy-paste from the cartoon, but they could have at least tried. And the 3 scenes I refer to are just awful acting from everyone involved. Anyways, back to Azula. All of that makes her the opposite of what she's supposed to be. Netflix made her an insecure and whiny daddy's girl. There is this scene where she talks back to Ozai. She refuses to be a part of a training exercise he organized or something like that, and she just looks at her dad's face and says no. Azula is absolutely loyal to the Fire Lord. She would never do that. And this is out of character for both the original Azula and this shitty live action version, cause even though they changed most of the core traces of her personality, she's still a fierce devotee. That's not Azula at all. Enough about the blue girl, let's talk about her brother. I don't have that much issues with Zuko here other than the characterization that made his scar look like a black eye. Did Ozai burn his face or just punch it very hard? Anyways, Dallas Liu is incredible on the role, he's angry and dramatic, but the script really doesn't help. The scenes with him and Iroh bring some good emotion to the relationship, but Zuko, especially on the first book, is way angrier than that. He's the main antagonist of book 1, and in the live action they made him kinda nice. He's supposed to be ruthless and cruel at first, because he's an edgy teenager who got kicked out of his house. He's got 0 emotional intelligence and just wants to regain his honor at all costs. His arc throughout the show is about growing out of all that, learning to be better, letting go of the past, fixing your mistakes, and even in the darkest moments finding your way back to light. But for that to work, we need to actually see the darkest moments. We need to see the cold and ruthless Zuko to feel the impact of his redemption, but Netflix refuses to acknowledge him as a villain. Everyone knows he's getting a redemption, and they know it, so they wanted to give some hints on it, but they turned out setting it up very early on. He's a little compassionate and kinda empathetic, and it messes up the redemption arc. So for knowing the redemption is coming, they ended up ruining the very storyline they were trying to prepare the audience for. And this is yet another indication that they have no clue what they're doing with this story. They really think I'm just gonna accept the absolute bullshit that is the Agni Kai against Ozai? You're telling me that Zuko not only fights back, but he could have won? Get out of here! First of all, Zuko refusing to fight and begging for mercy makes the whole story way more tragic and profound, and that adds a lot of weight to the moment he actually stands up to his father. And second, this is a 13-year-old who had as much firebending training as a neglected child could get. The only way he's winning a fight against the most powerful firebender in the world is if he let him win, which is something we all know pretty damn well is not gonna happen. The same way I didn't see that many issues with Zuko, we have Sokka. Same old, characterization on point, the actor is great, and most of his storylines are roughly preserved as far as possible, but they committed one little crime that kinda stings. He's not sexist anymore. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that being sexist is a good thing, but it was such an important part of the character at the beginning of the journey. Meeting with the Kyoshi warriors, disdaining them, and almost immediately getting his ass whooped humbles him and creates such a strong bond between him and Suki, and him and Katara, because he learns the value of having women around other than like for cooking and sewing. But they robbed Sokka of this growth, making the character seem a little more bland and linear throughout the story. The showrunners said that they removed this character traits from him because it would be unpleasant to see in a modern live action format. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, sexism isn't supposed to be pleasant. There's so many other points, but I'm gonna rapid fire through some of them so we can get to season 2 while I'm still young. A big part of what happens originally in book 1 is condensed in Omashu. They get there kinda fast and a lot of stuff starts happening at the same time. The Bumi storyline happens at the same time as Jet and the Freedom Fighters, the Mechanist and the Cave of Two Lovers. In the cartoon, all of that happens in different places. The Bumi stuff is really in Omashu, but the Jet storyline is in the forest nearby an Earth Kingdom village. The Mechanist is in the Air Temple and the Cave of Two Lovers isn't even in book 1. By the way, why is Sokka with Katara in the cave? This is a crucial plot point for the relationship between Aang and Katara, but Netflix doesn't seem very interested in this romance. They must be Zutara shippers. Oh, and by the way, that's the reason why Sokka and Katara are not at all involved in the Bumi part, because they are too busy with the other 15 important things happening in Omashu. The whole spirit world is just bullshit. They clearly did not respect at all the mythological part of the original story. Everyone keeps coming and going, people have visions and dreams, it's all very weird. The Avatar is supposed to be the bridge between the spiritual and material worlds precisely because having a strong spiritual connection is rare and hard to achieve. While in the subject of spirits, I don't like Roku, he's weird. Not much to say, I just didn't vibe with him. And he says nothing about the Sozin Comet, which is the main reason why he so urgently wants to speak with Aang in the first place. So what is he doing here? Speaking of speaking, Aang seems to only be able to speak with his past lives when he's in the presence of a statue of them, which complicates everything for no reason. Where is Jongjong? The whole storyline that leads to Aang creating a mental block with firebending is completely gone. Good luck with that in season 3. Also, the Jongjong part helps make sense out of the order of learning the elements. Think about it. Aang needs to learn all 4. He's already an airbending master. He's unfrozen in the water tribe, so it's logical to go first after a waterbending teacher for him and Katara. Then he plays with fire and gets burned, pun intended. So he's afraid of fire, therefore the next in line is earth. It makes total sense, but the live action just don't have it. I assume this is more of a nitpick, but it's this kind of detail-oriented writing that differentiate good stories from the perfect ones. The first season of the live action was very criticized, but overall it was fine. It wasn't as good as I hoped, but not as bad as I feared, so maybe they listened to the opinions of the fans around the internet and made it all work out for season 2. Right? Most of what's good about season 2 are the things that worked in season 1 and they just didn't change. The visual part has improved, the show looks even better. Zuko's car looks like a scar now, which is great. The locations are so beautiful, Omashu, Ba Sing Se, the serpents, pass all of them. The music's awesome and the casting is the same except for a few new characters that didn't have a casting to talk about before for obvious reasons. Miyako as Toph Beifong is another top-notch casting choice, so amazing. She clearly understands the character, she's funny, she's a great actress and even her voice sounds similar to the original. Toph is most likely the best thing of this new season. Still on the casting subject, Aang is like 30 now. Okay, he doesn't look that old, but he's the tallest of the gang now, so that's telling something. I'm just mentioning this here because I actually like the way they handle the kid actors growing up situation. I don't like these older visuals to Aang, his head is not round anymore, so it throws me off a little bit, but it's fine as long as they don't just ignore it and pretend this dude is still 12, like we've seen happen before. And they don't ignore it, it's one of the first things to happen in the season. They run into Suki and they talk about how much Aang grew up, so they really committed to a longer time skip between seasons. This is a positive thing for me because there is no way of stopping kids from growing up and they can't shoot the seasons back to back, so they need to work around it. And I believe that's one of the reasons they didn't set a date for Sozin Comet's passing in season 1. In the cartoon, the comet's coming soon. Aang has only about a year to train before the Fire Lord have the comet's power on his side. But since the show takes a long time to make, they didn't want to set a date for the end of the story, otherwise Twinkle Toes would have a classic case of Netflix teenager. Another good thing to happen in season 2 is the follow-up on the whole situation with Iroh's past they set up in season 1. They really lost it halfway through the season, but there is one good scene in this storyline. He initially doesn't want to go to Ba Sing Se because of his time at the war, it makes all of it a lot more dramatic. Originally, he's much more healed about it, but if the season showed us Iroh finding peace with his past in Ba Sing Se, it would be a very nice turn of events. Too bad they don't like any kind of character development whatsoever. Also, the fall of the Earth Kingdom is taken way more seriously here, and those things are a very good way of making the story more mature. And that's the end of the good stuff about season 2 session. Yeah, it was short. But look at the bright side! The writing got worse. I mean, they're making the very same mistakes but more fiercely this time. That thing I mentioned about season 1 telling you what is happening on screen or what just happened a while ago or what is going to happen in a few minutes is so evident here. Remember the scene where Katara figures out where the underground earthbending tournament is happening so they can search for an earthbending master for Aang? Well, in the original, she says she used her feminine charm or something like that, and when they pass through the alley we see that she just froze the boys to the wall. In the live action, she says about the same words but right before passing the alley, Sokka says, "Let me guess, waterbending?" I mean, yeah, we're just about to see that, why are you telling me? And it doesn't stop there. Almost every line of dialogue is exposition. They're super worried with people not getting what's going on, and it shows. The story is super rushed, even more than in season 1. They go back to Omashu, talk to Bumi, go through the Serpent's Pass for some reason, and find about the Sozin Comet all in episode 1. Bumi tells Aang about the Jing, he says all of the things we know from the cartoon about mastering the art of waiting and listening to master earthbending, but since everything's happening so fast, there is no time to absorb the lesson. Aang gets to Omashu, finds Bumi, talks to him and leaves in about 4 minutes. We don't see Aang actually trying to save him. Bumi's not even locked in a metal box, he's just in a room. I know this is a detail, but it shows the lack of coherence of the adaptation. Makes even less sense now that Bumi is just a psychopath who tried to kill Aang 1 season ago. In the cartoon, Aang rushes to save Bumi because he thinks he needs help. He believes that being in the metal box, he can't bend, therefore he couldn't escape if he wanted to. And just being locked behind the door with a couple of guards would never stop Bumi. It's clear and obvious that he's there by choice from the start. The Fire Nation puts zero effort into locking up the most powerful earthbender they know. It's almost like they want him to escape. And everyone is a Jing master now apparently, because at the very beginning of the next episode, Katara have a whole conversation with Sokka about it. It feels so unnatural. It's clear that this dialogue is only there in case you forgot this detail about what you just watched 1 episode ago. Talking about unnatural, they did the same plot point scramble thing from season 1, and the story got so messy and so confusing. A lot of things just don't make sense anymore, and part of that is because of this annoying way the writers decided to tell this story. In the first episode, they help some refugees that escaped from Omashu when the Fire Nation took over. Then we have the whole situation between Aang and Bumi, and they go straight to Ba Sing Se through the Serpent's Pass. There is so much stuff to happen between Omashu and Ba Sing Se. Originally, they only arrive in Ba Sing Se halfway through the season. The swamp episode is just gone, they didn't go to Wan Shi Tong's library, Appa didn't get stolen, they didn't even meet Toph yet. What are these people doing in the Serpent's Pass? Things happen in a certain order for a reason. Changing the storytelling structure is fine as long as you keep its integrity. Netflix decided to change a whole lot without paying attention to the details, and this is one of the most detail-oriented stories I've ever seen. That's why this adaptation sucks. In the cartoon, there is a ferry boat that takes people to Ba Sing Se, but the gang gave their tickets to a refugee family, and Appa was stolen in the desert during the Wan Shi Tong's library episode, so they can't fly or go by ferry. The Serpent's Pass is the only option left to go to Ba Sing Se, and it's the last option because it's extremely dangerous. Why would they even consider the Serpent's Pass if they still have Appa? It doesn't make sense! The Mechanist tells them about an astronomical discovery he made, the Sozin Comet. Having him tell them about it and now Roku is fine, I guess, but it removes all of the mystical nature of it and really tones down the importance of Aang's connection to his past lives. And I feel like this is an information they should already have. The comet is what gives a sense of urgency to the story. Later, they need more money because they have a group of refugees and themselves to feed, so they find out about the Earth Rumble, the underground earthbending tournament that has a good money prize.
In a little town called Nunya. None your business!
By the way, what the hell is this dialogue? The kid hears them talking about needing some quick and easy cash, comes closer to tell them about the Earth Rumble only to refuse to tell them where it is. What's the point of meddling in their business in the first place if you're just gonna half-offer a solution? The Earth Rumble is the most stupid portrayal of earthbending this show ever got us. The whole sequence of the tournament is at the same time longer than it should and too short. I don't know how they do it, it's a whole new level of bad writing. Originally, we see the boulder defeat a roster of competitors, then the blind bandit shows up, she waits and listens, and notices that. She humbles the boulder and that's it. But the live action shows so little of that while still being able to waste our time. They go watch the tournament and... wait, who's that?
The boulder!
That's the boulder? Oh my god, you're really putting in an effort to make me look stupid for praising the casting choices. Anyways, he very quickly defeats one dude and we go straight to the blind bandit. Her introduction is good because the lines are 1-to-1 copies of the cartoon, but the fight is so ugly. Toph takes way longer than she should to defeat this moron. They spend about 15 seconds pretending Toph was crushed by this rock, but there is no tension here because everyone above the age of 5 knows she's fine. The movements take too long, seems like they're wasting time on purpose, and it's all stiff, not strong and firm like earthbending is supposed to be, just poorly choreographed. And the whole reason for them going there in the first place makes no sense. They need money, and the first thing that seems reasonable is trying to win an earthbending competition with a grand total of 0 earthbendings in the group. You see how things are more and more losing their meaning as time goes by? When Toph joins the gang, her parents send these 2 dudes after her. I'm sorry, who are you? This not properly introduced character goes after her with, I wanna say, the boulder? Whatever, this part of the story is completely unimportant and they barely become a problem. So let's talk about Ba Sing Se.
There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
But surely there's everything else, except for the drill, because there is no point on having the drill since we barely saw any of the other things that should have already happened in the season. Really, all of the things that were supposed to happen before are either going to happen in Ba Sing Se or forgotten at all. And again, it's fine to mix up the story a little bit, but please make it make sense. That's all I'm asking for. Ba Sing Se becomes the stage of a very boring political thriller that drags on forever. They do all of the plots, Lake Laogai, the brainwashing, but it's all rushed and convoluted at the same time. The storytelling is so messed up. And Judy saying there is no war in Ba Sing Se pissed me off so much, and I didn't understand why at the time, but now I get it. It's not just because she never said it and the memes created a Mandela effect about it. The problem is 2 problems. First one is the same old coherence. Judy is brainwashed by the Dai Li. She is not just forbidden to talk about the war, she physically can't. They literally put a mental block on her so she won't engage on the subject and draw the attention away from it every time. That's why in the cartoon they mention the war and she just talks about something else or ignores completely. It's not that she's instructed to do so. I mean, she is, but it's one step further. She, in every single sense, can't talk about it. And the second problem is that they don't care at all about all of this I just explained because they just wanted to recreate the meme. They try very hard to insert iconic moments from the cartoon into the show without taking the time to understand the context of what's being said originally. The one-liners work in the cartoon because of context and the pacing of the episodic nature of an animated show. I can't ask them to do exactly the same because it's another form of media, but just making the characters say the iconic lines for the sake of making a reference feels empty and forced. Like Sokka saying Water Tribe to the Frozen Boys, or the cabbage merchant who's there just to create a very unfunny comedic moment and make people go, oh, there he is! Seems like they just want to create as much Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood moments as possible. Wan Shi-tong's library is in Ba Sing Se because of reasons, but it's actually in the spiritual world and can only be accessed through a spirit portal under the city because of reasons. Somehow Aang can project other people's spirits into the spiritual world along with his own. Because of reasons. Jet gets in there with them, and Toph too. How nice of them to bring the blind girl to hang out in the library. She actually talks to Kyoshi in there because, why not?
Where's Aang?
What do you mean where's Aang? Honey, that's you. She tells Toph about the eclipse, which completely steals Sokka's moment of showing how smart he is. I think Netflix just wants Sokka to be some dumb comic relief. Oh, and Jet dies in there. You know, because of reasons. This version of Professor Zay is very nothing to me. He's different, obviously worse, but I don't mind him. Originally, he's a scholar who's obsessed with finding the library to study for eternity. He's driven by an academic thirst for knowledge, and that's his fate. When the library collapses, he chooses to stay there reading and learning endlessly. In the live action, his motivations are very similar. However, since the writers are very all or nothing, everything in this show is either exposition dump or very close to not explained at all, so it's kinda hard to get exactly what the character really wants. The main difference is that by the end, instead of choosing to stay and learn, he betrays the gang and tells Wan Shi-tong they were gathering information to win the war. And gets eaten. Like I said, I don't care for him. Just like everything else, he's much better in the cartoon. When the library is collapsing, Toph leaves first, cause she wasn't reading anything, and she tries to hold it, like in the cartoon, which makes no sense because the library is not physically present, it's in the spiritual world. Guys, pay attention to what you're writing, please. Appa is stolen directly by the Dai Li and he has almost zero impact. Things are so weightless in this show. Aang gets kinda frustrated, he gets into the avatar state, blames Toph and is rude to everyone about it, more on that later, and that's it. He finds him in the next episode. We don't get anything from the Appa's Lost Days episode, which is a crime because that episode is so good, but most importantly, we don't get to see what Appa's disappearance means to Aang. Appa is Aang's closest family, his animal companion, they've been together since forever, and that's the only part of Aang's entire culture that's left alive. That is not just a transportation inconvenience. By losing Appa, Aang loses part of himself, and I didn't catch any of that in the live action. At least we got to see little Appa and Aang meeting for the the first time and becoming friends for life. I love this scene, it's so sweet. One other sweet part that I love and was completely misunderstood and messed up was the tales of Ba Sing Se. At a first glance, this episode looks a lot like a filler, but it's not. It's actually one of the most important episodes to happen originally in Ba Sing Se. This moment is purely about character development. The tale of Toph and Katara shows us Toph's insecurity about appearances despite being confident on who she is, and gives such a loving moment for her relationship with Katara. The tale of Iroh is the most touching one. He goes around all day helping other people and making them happy, and later by himself he feels his own sadness and grief on his son's birthday.
If only I could have helped you.
I cry every time. The tale of Aang is very simple, but it shows how much he values life and cares about all living creatures. In the tale of Sokka, he goes to a haiku reading. Looks like he's just seeking attention from the girls, but he's actually interested in poetry, showing the sensitive side of a guy who always wants to portray himself as a warrior. And he gets kicked out for saying one syllable too many, it's so funny. The tale of Zuko is one of my favorites. He goes out with a girl, they have dinner, and she takes him to her favorite place in the city, but the lamps aren't lit, so he lights them up for her. This tale shows us not only how socially awkward Zuko is, but how sweet he can be when he cares. I mean, no one in Ba Sing Se can know his Fire Nation, but he put that in danger to make the girl happy. It's also a nice portrait of the quiet and normal life Zuko and Iroh have found in Ba Sing Se after so many days of suffering. And then he comes home and says his night was nice, he's such a cutie pie. The last one is the tale of Momo that shows us how much he misses Appa and that they're very good friends. You see how the tales of Ba Sing Se is very far away from being a filler. But since this adaptation is not interested in the characters, it treats these little stories as fillers and brushes over them. Katara and Toph's tale was completely cut. Iroh's tale became about his past in the war, and here is the moment where I think they lost it with this storyline. He doesn't spend the day doing good stuff and helping people, he runs around the city thinking about only himself and his own pain. This way you can't really feel the moment when he goes mourn his son's death by the tree, because he's been whining all day long, so there's no contrast. The emotional weight comes from the realization that all his kindness and wisdom comes from loss and grief. When he says, "If only I could have helped you," we see a man who wishes he could have been for his son the wise and kind father he is to Zuko. I can't believe that was stolen from us. Aang doesn't really have anything, he just goes wherever Longfeng takes him and does community service or whatever. The haiku reading from the tale of Sokka is used to create one of the most artificial dialogues I've ever seen. The adaptation gives a glimpse of Zuko's tale, he meets the girl, but it's not nearly as sweet or layered as the original. And the tale of Momo is also completely cut. Looking at it side by side makes me see so much wasted potential. There's one more thing I need to talk about before moving on to the character specifics. In this live action adaptation, we as the audience were robbed of a lot of things, and what I think was the most criminal of them all is one of the best scenes in the entire cartoon, the invasion of the Earth King's palace. In this moment, they reunited with Appa and everyone's pissed. They've had enough of the political games of Longfeng and the Dai Li, so they go talk to the king through the front door. And let me tell you, these children are an absolute unit. This bunch of kids go through the most well-trained soldiers in the Earth Kingdom without breaking a sweat. Aang is in complete sync with Toph, Katara is wiping everyone out of the way and apologizing. And Appa doesn't even flinch, he just goes forward, look at its little tail. This scene goes so hard, I can't wait to see how they get into the palace in the live action. Oh, they just hid into some wine casks. That's cool. And there's no Bosco? Netflix once again shutting the mouths of everyone who praised them. They had such a perfect story in hands, full of details, their only job was to tell it. And they decided not to. I said it before and I'll say it again. It's fine to change things. I want the adaptation to be different. Otherwise, I'll just watch the perfect piece of media that is the cartoon. But make it make sense. Think about the changes you're making before making them. And most importantly, take a minute to get to know the characters you're working with, or you'll end up messing them up for plot purposes. And I'm afraid that's exactly the case here. If you think Aang lost too much of his goofiness and childlike traces in season 1, wait until you see what they did to him in season 2. What happened to this character in the first season was tolerable, cause the tone of the story wouldn't allow much more goofiness, but season 2 butchered what was left of poor Twinkletoes. In this season, he's an emotional teenager, he's rude, selfish and mean to people for no reason. He lashes out on his friends, he seems so angry, sometimes he talks like Zuko. His appreciation to Katara is almost gone, originally he would die for her, and I'm not talking about romance. Katara was Aang's first bending master, the person who took him out of the iceberg. She's one of his best friends.
You ready?
If I'm not, we know who to blame.
Aang would never say that. In this moment, he would say the opposite. I believe it would be something like, if I can, it's because I had the best teacher in the world. He likes to have fun and all, but he's not into the roasting type of fun. There's this scene in the cartoon where he tries to do so and almost creates a whole situation with Katara. Another scene that makes no sense to the character is this.
And it's too high. I'm just a kid.
So am I. Sometimes even airbenders can be scared of heights.
Ignore the terrible dialogue and focus on what Aang actually said. Sometimes even airbenders can be scared of heights? What a lot of crap! Airbenders laugh at gravity.
I laugh at gravity all the time. Gravity.
Also, he spends the entire season fighting against the Avatar state, which is a storyline that exists in the cartoon, but it was severely altered. This story suffers a lot with the absence of Guru Patik because he's the one who teaches Aang about the chakras. It's a deep concept that guides a lot of stuff in the story, not only about the Avatar state, and not having that takes out a lot of the complexity of the narrative. The live action made Aang's struggle with the Avatar state much more simplistic and inconsistent. He can't control it, but then he gets out of it in like 5 seconds. He's afraid of using it, then he's not anymore. When he's in front of the man who stole Appa, he goes into the Avatar state and gets out of it by himself before his feet even left the ground. It's all super glossed over and pointless. I wasn't the biggest Aang defender in season 1, but now he's just unrecognizable. And I can't talk about unrecognizable without mentioning Katara. She was never a very good character, we covered that, and now she has a little more personality. Too bad it's still not Katara. Book 2 Katara is an emerging leader. She's very maternal, she's maturing and learning how to keep everyone on the right path. In the live action, she doesn't have much of an arc, but the worst part is that they turn her into a vigilante. The girl who is the moral compass of the group, who's always making sure everyone follows the rules. She's a rebel now. And not any vigilante, the painted lady. I would love to take a peek into the writing room to see what the decision-making process was here. She goes around the lower rings of Ba Sing Se helping the poor and getting involved in fist fighting. Pause. When did Katara learn to fight? I mean, she's a fighter alright, but she's a waterbender. She never learned how to throw punches. I mean, excuse me, don't you remember that one scene where Suki teaches her how to punch? Which was the only contact she ever had with any form of physical fight training? Come on, be serious. Who's this person? I don't think there's a lot to say about the rest of the gang, but when it comes to this show, if you're not bad enough to be remembered, you're already ahead. Sokka is just about the same, only now he's weird around Suki because the moon's watching. Oh, and Suki. Glad I mentioned her. I don't remember her in the season. Her contribution is acknowledging that Aang is now 2 meters tall, making Sokka act weird, and teaching Katara how to properly punch. That's literally all I can recall from her. Toph is mostly great, I liked her, the actress is good, I don't want to be repetitive. The thing with her is the same thing with the show as a whole. The writing sucks, so she has a hard time not sucking. Her best lines are 1-to-1 copies from the cartoon, and the rest of them are overall really bad.
I'm Toph Bayfar, and I invented metal bending.
God have mercy on my miserable soul. The scene where the 4 of them fight is outrageous. No one is making sense to their characters and everyone is so dramatic. Aang immediately loses hope and starts blaming everything on the others, and he's especially rude to Katara when he finds out about the painted lady stuff.
Everything that I did was to help people.
Well, it didn't help us, did it?
What do you mean it didn't help us? Who is this selfish little jerk? That's not Aang. Take this arrow out of your bald head right now. This little shit drives away every single one of his friends. He's just so mean in this scene. It makes me sad. It's even sadder to think that Zuko is the one who suffered the most in the cruel hands of Netflix. Remember what I said about him before, that Netflix made him a little compassionate and kinda empathetic? They took a step back in this season. I don't know why they reversed the situation like this, but in season 2, Zuko is angrier. He lashes out more often, he's confused and sad just like in the original, but in a very weird way, cause we've already seen Zuko being a little compassionate, so now being rude to Iroh and all of that feels like a step back for the character. The natural course of his redemption is being angry and rude, then growing out of it, becoming confused and sad, and finally when he gets back home by the beginning of book 3, he realizes the wrongs of his ways and goes help Aang. The adaptation made him not that angry at first, kinda empathetic, then he becomes confused and sad but also angrier than before. It's very unclear what direction they were trying to take Zuko here, but the biggest crime they committed against his character was about the episode Zuko Alone. It's one of the best episodes of the entire show, probably the most important episode for Zuko's character development and to understand him as a person. It's a slow-paced, deeply psychological episode with almost no action scenes that portrays Zuko in his most introspective form. He interacts with a lot of different people, mostly villagers around the Earth Kingdom, and even though the live action mixed up some elements of it, it follows roughly the same plot points. It's a very dried off version, but at least some of the stuff is there. This show made me say stuff is there like it's a good thing. Look at the state we've reached. They got rid of that little boy's parents and gave him a sister, who by the way would be an excellent casting choice for Mei. And she is Song, that girl with the burn scar on her leg. Interacting with this girl is an important turning point for Zuko to realize the Fire Nation is actually hurting innocent people, so it makes sense for her to be in the middle of the Zuko Alone's plot points. But why is their conversation so long? They originally talked for about 25 seconds and the live action turned it into a 2.5 minutes long dialogue. When I say this show is poorly written, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not only calling out bad dialogue, cause this conversation isn't that bad, but the waste of time and over-explaining is so frequent. This scene in the original takes less than 30 seconds to send the message. Song says 2 lines, we see the scar, we see the reaction in Zuko's face, and it's over. Because there's nothing else to show, they sent the message. But the live action needs to make sure the people who are scrolling their phones with the show playing on the background understands what's going on. Therefore, the dialogue is stretched out as much as possible, so if you only catch a few phrases, you're still in the game. While in the subject of Zuko alone, there's one detail that changes everything, and I don't think Netflix realized how big of a screw up it is. In the cartoon, Zuko is traveling by himself with very limited supplies, and there's a point in the journey where he smells food. He sees a piece of meat in the fire, he considers stealing it cause he's starving, but then he takes a better look and sees that the food belongs to a pregnant woman. He then gives up on stealing and goes on with his travel. The live action turned this upside down. He actually steals the supplies from the pregnant woman while she sleeps. And if you don't get why this is a big narrative problem, allow me. Avatar is a very detail-oriented story. I've said that before a couple of times. Therefore, changing details changes the whole story that came before and that'll come after. Zuko, starving, sees the very easy chance of getting something to eat. He could just go down there, show his sword, and they would give him the food. No one would even get hurt. He just wanted to eat after all. But that doesn't make it right. He would still be stealing, trading his hunger for the hunger of a man and a pregnant woman. Giving up on stealing and moving on shows that he's a good person in his core. Even having done a lot of shameful things, even confused and lost, he's changing. And this scene shows he's actually capable of change, capable of good things, cause deep down he knows what's right. Deciding to steal the pregnant woman's supplies conveys the opposite. The live action is telling us that Zuko turns to evil upon desperation. How am I supposed to believe that this guy is gonna be one of the good guys? That's why I say Netflix doesn't know what they want to do with Zuko. He's empathetic at first, but by the time he's supposed to be changing and showing glimpses of goodness, he's stealing pregnant women. The whole Blue Spirit storyline is also a big hot mess. In the cartoon, he uses the Blue Spirit persona to do things Prince Zuko never could. When Aang is captured, he breaks him out because he wants to be the one to deliver the Avatar to the Fire Nation. Later, he uses it to rob people around the Earth Kingdom so he and Iroh can live with a little more dignity. The final moment of Zuko wearing the mask is when he finds Appa in Ba Sing Se. He was gonna use him as bait to capture Aang, but Iroh confronts him in one of the best and most important scenes of his entire redemption arc. I'll come back to this scene in a moment, but for now just think about all of those situations where Zuko wore the mask. His actions are self-serving. He uses the Blue Spirit in selfish ways to get what he wants, and it's also a bit of a coward move because he doesn't want his face associated with any of those things. In the play where Zuko sees the Blue Spirit as a kid, he's the villain, and the person in the red mask defeats him. In Zuko's nightmare, the blue dragon has Azula's voice while the red one has Iroh's voice. Even his great-grandfather's Avatar Roku's dragon was red while Fire Lord Sozin's was blue. All of that symbolizes the blue as his connection to Azula, Ozai, and the Fire Nation. Acting as the Blue Spirit, Zuko is putting himself in the position of a villain. When he frees Appa and throws away the blue mask, he's throwing away the connection to his bad side. The live action flips the perception of what the Blue Spirit means. They turn the Blue Spirit into a vigilante, a hero in Ba Sing Se alongside with the painted lady. That's a weird sentence. All of the symbols are inverted. In the play, the Blue Spirit is a hero who protects innocence. In Zuko's nightmare, the blue dragon has his mother's voice while the red one has Ozai's voice. All of that strips away the meaning and depth behind Zuko's actions as the Blue Spirit, turning it into another pointless storyline. With this, we also lose the scene I mentioned before where Zuko is about to free Appa and is confronted by his uncle. What Iroh says to Zuko changes everything. It's what leads him to throwing away the blue mask, which is such an important step towards his redemption. During the episode that tries tries to adapt Zuko alone, we see a few flashbacks of his childhood with his mother, Azula, and Ozai for some reason. Did I mention he shows up too much? Go home, Ozai, you're drunk. And also, these kids look nothing like their grown-up counterparts, besides being horrible actors. In these flashbacks, we see Zuko's relationship with his mother and the day she disappeared, which makes no sense at all. She tried to take the kids and run away, but the whole reason for her disappearance is to protect Zuko in the first place. When Iroh's son died in the war, Ozai presented himself to their father, Fire Lord Azulon, and asked to be moved forward in the succession line to be the next Fire Lord, since Iroh does not have an heir anymore. Azulon, offended with the idea of betraying his firstborn, commands Ozai to kill his own, Zuko. His mom Ursa made a deal with Ozai to protect Zuko. They plotted the death of Azulon so Ozai could become Fire Lord. In exchange, Ozai would spare Zuko's life. But then Ozai immediately banished Ursa out of fear of what she's capable of doing to him if he ever turned against her or her children. Trying to take the children with her would only put them in danger. And another thing I hate so much about this scene, Ursa says something to the children before being taken, something about sticking together because they only have each other. When I watched this, I immediately said, Azula is gonna use this against Zuko. Well, by the end of the season, when they all meet in that crystal cave, they fight and Azula quotes her mother to Zuko, making him change his mind and attack Aang. Who would have thought? Am I being repetitive if I say the dialogue in this scene is really bad? Since we mentioned Azula, some quick thoughts. I think Azula is a little less annoying in this season, but she's still very detached from what Azula is supposed to be. She makes Mei and Ty Lee fight each other out of nowhere just to make them prove their loyalty to her or something, and besides making no sense and the dialogue being a delight as always, that was one of the cringiest fight scenes I've ever seen. Almost every scene with Azula in this season is really bad, poor girl. And her plan to break into Ba Sing Se made me laugh. She says she's gonna get the Earthbender prisoners they got from the Earth Kingdom, create a tunnel and get the Fire Nation army into the city from underneath the walls. And she says it like it's the perfect plan, no one's gonna notice, they have the element of surprise, and it is a perfect plan. If you're trying to get your whole army killed, she's seriously suggesting the Fire Nation army put their lives in the hands of prisoners? People with nothing to lose and could just close the tunnel, suffocating everyone? And when she presents this cataclysmic plan in the war room, her father says it's a good plan, it's smart, and it's a plan he would have thought of himself. Seriously, who wrote this show? Are the writers idiots or do they just think we are the idiots? Speaking of the man himself, a brief moment about Ozai. All of his scenes are god-awful. All the things that work in this show are one-to-one copies of the cartoon. The new things Netflix created are just horrible, and Ozai is not even supposed to be present at this point in the story, so you do the math. I don't think I've heard one good line come out of this man's mouth. He's here exclusively to provide exposition and look angry. Oh, and he wants Zuko back home. Out of nowhere, he just sends Azula after him because he changed his mind, I guess. Can someone please make sense? Anyone, really, any character, I'm begging. They're sacrificing storylines and character development left and right just to create a big spectacle. Like in the Agony Kai of Zuko versus Ozai. Zuko is not supposed to fight, but they proved us in that time and many others that they are willing to butcher everything that makes a character who he is in favor of getting a few more minutes of fire shining on screen. The cartoon is about characters and their relationships. Everything happens around that. Every storyline is moved by character development. But this show has no interest in actually developing its characters. It seems more interested on getting to the next plot point or the next action sequence as soon as possible. You know, to show off a little more CGI and bending choreography. Look at the fire! You can say that in an 8 episodes long season there is no time to adapt every single storyline from the original, but books 1 and 2 of the cartoon had a runtime of 7 hours and 40 minutes. You know what else has about 8 hours of runtime? 8 episodes of 60 minutes. In other words, time's not an issue here. They were not forced to cut out anything, they just didn't know how to use the time they so much clearly had. I've seen some people say it's unfair to compare the adaptation to the original because we have to judge the show for its own merits. And I actually try to do that, but if the original didn't exist, this show would still be very bad. And isn't that the point of an adaptation? To bring back memories of something we grew up watching and loving. If you don't want the live action adaptation being compared to the original, simply don't adapt. Create something new, give it another name. Cause if you come up with a show saying, hey, this is Avatar, comparing them is just inevitable. For me, it's clear and obvious that Netflix does not understand Avatar at all. And that's because they does not respect Avatar at all.